I was standing at the bustling Miami cruise port, sunscreen on my cheeks, straw hat perched just right, suitcases at my feet. At 72, this trip was supposed to be a dream come true. My son Adam and his wife Stephanie had planned the family cruise for months. I imagined laughter with my grandkids, warm sunsets, dinners under chandeliers. But then my phone buzzed. "Mom, there's been a change of plans. You're not coming. Stephanie wants this to be just the family. Just. Family." Before I tell you what I did next, make sure you're subscribed and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this reach hearts all over the world, and this one? You won't see the ending coming. I read the message again and again, disbelief washing over me like cold water. When I looked up, there they were, on the ship's upper deck. Adam, Stephanie, and the kids, laughing, pointing, pretending not to see me standing alone among strangers. My hands trembled. I had worked 2 jobs to raise that boy, bought their house with my retirement money, paid off their mortgage just 2 months ago. And now I was an afterthought, a footnote. Disposable. I turned, grabbed my suitcases, and walked away from the port without a glance back. The taxi ride home blurred past. My cheerful little apartment now felt hollow. In my office drawer, beneath old receipts and photo albums, lay the house deed, in my name. Their house. My house. I stared at the blue folder as something inside me shifted, not rage exactly, but a crystal-clear calm. It was as if a fog had lifted and all the small humiliations over the years aligned into a single, undeniable truth. The comments about boundaries. The subtle exclusions from birthdays, the gift cards in place of thoughtful presents. All of it was a slow push out of their lives. I wasn't mom anymore. I was a convenient babysitter, a human ATM. And this time, they'd pushed too far. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Dawson? It's Margaret Hill. I need legal advice about a house." By nightfall, my plan was forming. The lawyer confirmed what I already knew. Legally, the house was entirely mine. I could sell it without their permission. 10 days at sea gave me plenty of time. I emailed Teresa, a realtor friend. "I need to sell quickly." "It's a matter of dignity." That night, I made tea, opened my balcony door, and sat under the city lights. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking about my son, his wife, or my grandchildren. I was thinking about me, the woman who once dreamed of Paris, loved to dance, had ambitions outside motherhood. Somewhere along the way, I'd let that woman disappear. But she wasn't gone, she was waiting. The next morning, I drove to their house with the spare key Adam had given me for emergencies. The neighbor waved cheerfully as I explained I was picking up plants to water. Inside, their perfect suburban home was silent. I walked through each room slowly, remembering the day I handed Adam the keys and cried tears of joy. Now, their family photos barely included me. The quilt I'd made them was stuffed in a closet. It was like I had been erased room by room. In Adam's office, I found an unsigned draft of a property transfer, dated 3 months earlier. They had planned to make the house theirs the moment I finished paying. Evidence. Not that I needed more motivation, but it confirmed everything. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was calculation. 2 days later, Teresa brought a young couple to view the house. Doctors, newly married, no kids. They fell in love instantly. "We'll pay above asking, cash, close in a week," they said. I signed the initial papers without hesitation. The sale went through smoothly. Closing day was set for July 27th, 1 day before the cruise returned. I packed their belongings carefully, labeled each box, and paid 3 months' rent on a storage unit. Then, I sat at their kitchen table and wrote a letter. "Adam and Stephanie, the house you called home was legally mine, and now it's sold. When you told me I wasn't part of the family, you made your position clear. Now I'm making mine. Your belongings are in storage, paid for 3 months. The new owners move in tomorrow. I'm reclaiming my life. Don't look for me, Margaret. I left the letter beside the house deed and sale contract, neatly stacked. Then I turned on Aretha Franklin on my phone and danced alone in the empty living room. My laughter echoed off the bare walls. It wasn't a dance of revenge. It was a dance of liberation. For decades, I'd existed in the margins of other people's stories. That night, I took center stage. 3 days before the cruise returned, Adam sent a message. "Mom, we miss you. Can't wait to show you the photos." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just the expectation that I'd slip back into my role. I let the message sit unread. I didn't go to the port to gawk or gloat the day they came back. I sat 2 blocks away at a quiet cafe where the barista already knew I'd take my espresso strong. From the window, I could see the white hull easing to the dock, a floating city coughing up tan, smiling families. Somewhere in that crowd were my son and his wife, waving to the kids and to the idea of just the family, as if I were a removable part. I paid my bill and left before they could spot me. There was nothing to watch. I had already said everything that needed to be said, on paper, in a neat envelope left on their kitchen table beside the deed and the signed sale contract. Their suitcases would roll into a life that no longer existed. Mine already had. At 7:43 the next morning, my doorbell rang. When I checked the peephole, Adam was there, alone, hair mussed, eyes sleepless. I opened the door and stepped aside. He didn't sit. He didn't breathe. He hissed, "How could you?" His voice cracked on the "you," like it had when he was a boy who'd lost a soccer final. "You sold our house without telling us." I kept my hands folded so he wouldn't see them shake. "It was never your house," I said evenly. "It was mine. It is my name on the deed and always has been." He looked stunned, as if the word deed were a punch. That blue folder had sat in my desk for 5 years, paid off 2 months ago, while I was still being told that family meant everything until it meant nothing at all. "We lived there," he said, pacing, searching the ceiling for a righteous answer. "The kids grew up there." I thought of the picture frames where my face had vanished year by year, the quilt I'd made folded into a closet like a mistake, the unsigned draft of a property transfer I'd found in his desk, dated 3 months earlier, waiting for me to make the last mortgage payment so the conversation could happen on their timetable, not mine. I had taken the draft with me as proof that forgetfulness had never been the problem. Calculation was. "I paid for a storage unit 3 months, I told him, keeping my voice gentle because I remembered the little boy under all that jaw-clenching. "Your things are safe. You have time to find a new place. The new owners move in today." His shoulders dropped as if the word "today" weighed more than the rest. "You thought about the children?" he asked, quiet and scalding. "Every hour," I said. "I also thought about the kind of man my son will be if he thinks respect is optional, that he can exclude his mother from a family he wouldn't have without her." He winced. I didn't add the line that hummed under my tongue, that he'd stood on a ship's balcony and watched my phone light up with, "You're not coming," while I stood in a crowd and swallowed down 30 years of sacrifice like bad coffee. He knew he had to. He tried an apology, a thin one about poor wording and being stressed. I shook my head. It wasn't wording. "It was a worldview," I said. "I have heard your boundaries for years. Consider mine now." I told him I'd be traveling for a while. Paris. I said it softly, like the name of an old friend you were afraid to call. "How long?" he asked. "As long as it takes," I said. "I don't know who I am without being your mother and your grandchildren's on-demand grandma." "I need to find out." His mouth opened, closed. "Does Sarah know?" I nodded toward his phone. "She will when you tell her." He didn't rage. Not then. He just stared at me, seeing a stranger where his favorite appliance used to stand, the one that dispensed childcare, money, and validation on command. He left without slamming the door. The quiet he left behind was the first mercy I'd felt from him in years. The next visitor was Stephanie, polished as ever but with a necklace I recognized because I'd bought it for her last Christmas. Pearls look different on a contrite woman. She stood on my threshold and asked to talk, woman to woman. I let her in. She began with the usual words: mistake, stress, boundaries. "We wanted to build our own family," she said. "And when you needed childcare or a check?" I asked. "Were those your boundaries too?" Her cheeks flushed. To her credit, she didn't trot out the kids like a human shield. "Not immediately. What can we do?" she asked finally. Not to undo it, but to move forward. It was a smaller question than I'd expected, and it softened something brittle inside me. "Weekends with the kids," I said. "One weekend a month. Just me and them. You two can have your just family time the rest of the month however you like it, but my relationship with them will not be an accessory you clip on when convenient." She swallowed hard and nodded. I believed, for the first time in a long while, that she heard the difference between punishment and boundary. I kept the first weekend simple. The zoo, as the children had outgrown the aquarium without telling anyone. We laughed at the capybaras. The kids painted lion faces on my cheeks. I answered none of their gentle questions with bitterness. When I dropped them off, Adam stood on the step with a practiced casualness. "They had fun?" he asked. "They did." He nodded, eyes wet, and didn't push further. It was progress, the kind that happens one question you don't ask at a time. That night, I opened my passport, felt the dry hiss of its pages, and booked the ticket I had dreamed about in teenaged fragments and middle-aged guilt, Miami to Paris. I called my sister, Mary, the thunderhead to my old soft weather. "Next month," I told her. "I'm coming." She whooped, then lowered her voice into that warm iron I've always envied. "Come home to yourself," she said. I bought the ticket with money from the house I no longer had to pretend wasn't mine. I slept like a child for the first time since the port. The day I flew, the sun was bright and the city ungenerous as ever with parking spots. In the TSA line, I locked eyes with a woman holding a toddler, and she smiled in that tired way we share across generations, the recognition of time and body and the work no one sees. On the plane, champagne arrived like a permission slip. I didn't toast to revenge, I toasted to oxygen. To the first full breath in years. Paris met me with a soft rain, and Mary with a candy-colored umbrella. The city smelled like stone and butter. She took me to her place in the Marais, galleries below, history above, a quiet courtyard in the middle like the center of a clock. "How long?" she asked, handing me a key. "I don't know," I said. It was the most honest answer of my life. Mary gave me a guest room and a challenge. "You need a small place of your own," she said, "because you can love us and still need a door that locks from the inside." We found a studio with tall windows, a kitchen the size of a postcard, and an old wood floor that sang when you crossed it. The lease was month to month. The landlord's eyebrows rose when he read my age on the passport. I smiled until he smiled back. "I'm here to learn to be a person again," I told him, and he didn't laugh. He only handed me the pen. Paris unspooled like a silk ribbon. Mornings at a boulangerie where the woman behind the counter learned my name, my middle one, the one I decided to claim from this day forward. "Evelyn," I would say when asked, and if they leaned in, I'd add, "But everyone calls me Evie." It felt right in my mouth, lighter, truer. Afternoons in museums I'd only seen on postcards in other people's houses. Evenings at Mary's table with people who argued kindly and listened without taking, who asked me questions that didn't begin with, "Can you?" The first time someone said, "What do you want?" I took too long to answer. That's how you know you're starting over. 2 weeks in, I signed up for a watercolor class in Montmartre. The instructor was a gentleman whose hands were stained with decades of color. "You can guide the water," he said, skimming a brush across paper, "but you cannot control it. That is where the beauty lives." I made a mess of a sky and then made another one. I learned how blue forgives and how a bad stroke can become a shadow if you let it. It was the first spiritual instruction I'd accepted in years. I walked home with paint under my nails and the feeling that I'd built something no one else owned. Every night, I kept my phone off until the sun was gone and the rooftops were charcoal. Then I'd turn it on and check messages once. There were photos from the kids, a Lego tower, a missing tooth, a glitter-drunk birthday card. There were texts from Adam stiff at first, then earnest, then sporadic. I answered what needed answers and let silence do the rest. It's amazing how much of your life you can take back by not replying immediately. On a rainy Tuesday, an email arrived from my attorney. Daniel had retained counsel and was threatening to contest the sale. Verbal promises implied future transfers, the kinds of low-oxygen arguments people make when they've lived high on someone else's hill for too long. Mr. Dawson's note was calm. No legal standing, no written agreement. Nothing to fear. I was not afraid, only heavy, the way you feel when you carry a box that could break what's inside if you jostle it. I brewed tea that tasted like clean earth and called Adam for the first time since I'd left. "Why the lawyer?" I asked when he answered. He sighed the old boyish sigh. "Because it isn't fair," he said. "It was our home. And that draft quitclaim deed I found in your desk," I asked gently, "dated 3 months before my last payment? Were you waiting for the moment I would be most grateful to bring it up?" Silence. Then, "It was Stephanie's idea," he said, small. "We thought it was time to formalize what you always said, that the house was for us." "For you and yours are not the same word," I said. "You tried to make them the same by leaving me out of the sentence." He didn't argue. He swallowed. I could hear it across an ocean. "Are we going to live like this forever?" he asked finally. "You in Europe, angry. Us patching holes." "I'm not angry," I said, and felt the truth of it even as my voice shook. "I am building something. You can build too, but you will not build it on me anymore." I hung up and cried, not for the house, not for the fight, not even for the child who made that call, but for the woman who had been too easy to step on for so long. I cried for the person who believed love meant erasing yourself until no one noticed you weren't there. Then I washed my face, pinned my hair, and went back to class. We were painting the Seine at dusk. My river bled into my bridge where it wasn't supposed to, and the teacher nodded like I'd done it on purpose. "There," he said softly. "Let it run. See what it becomes." In the quiet of my small apartment that night, I made myself a new promise, spoken out loud to an empty room so it would have to be real. I will be seen as Evie, as a woman with a life of her own, or I will not be seen at all. The next morning, the city cracked open into sun. I walked without a destination, only a direction, and for the first time in my life, I didn't check the time. Somewhere between the river and the market, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my attorney, brief and reassuring. The challenge would go nowhere. I put the phone away and kept walking. Paris had taught me a new step, one foot, then the next, toward a life that could carry my name. And later, when the day cooled and the windows across the street filled with lamplight, I set fresh paper on the board and tried again. The wash lifted and pooled, found its edge, and glowed. If you give color room, it becomes itself. So do women. So do mothers who finally remember they were people first. I rinsed the brush, leaned back, and let the paper dry on its own time. I wouldn't hurry it. I wouldn't hurry me. Winter crept into Paris quietly, the way forgiveness does not announce, not loud, just a slow thaw. My little studio had become a sanctuary. Every morning, the boulangerie woman would hand me a croissant still warm from the oven, her eyes crinkling as she said, "Bonjour, Evie." No one in this city saw me as someone's mother or grandmother. I was just me. I painted more. I walked everywhere. I learned to love silence that wasn't waiting for someone to need me. One afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the chilly wind, my attorney emailed. Adam had dropped the legal challenge. "He's accepted the reality," the message said. I read it twice, not with relief, but with a quiet acknowledgement. The old life had truly ended. Then, an unexpected email arrived. Not from Adam, but from Stephanie. Her words weren't polished like before. She wrote about couples therapy, about facing the ugly patterns they'd built, about finally realizing how they'd treated me like a utility instead of a person. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't bargain. She simply acknowledged the hurt. I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation. But what I found was sincerity wrapped in humility. I replied with honesty. I appreciate your words. I'm healing. I'm glad you're working on yourselves. The children are always welcome in my life. Short, clear. No open doors, but no slammed ones either. Weeks later, Daniel arrived in Paris. Alone. He found me at a small gallery in the Marais, where 2 of my watercolors hung modestly on a white wall. He walked in with the hesitant steps of a man carrying too much history. When he saw me, he smiled nervously. "Your painting is beautiful," he said, looking at the blue-purple sky I'd made one evening over the Seine. "I didn't know you painted." "Neither did I replied. We left the gallery and walked through the cold streets, steam rising from our cups of hot chocolate. For the first time in decades, he spoke without defensiveness. "I used to think of you as an extension of myself," he admitted. "You were just Mom, the person who handled everything. I never thought about who you were beyond that." Therapy had softened his edges. Grief had sharpened his awareness. He didn't ask me to undo anything. He didn't beg for the house or demand explanations. He simply said, "I'm trying to be better." We didn't hug like strangers forced to play family. We hugged like 2 people meeting honestly for the first time in years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was real. That Christmas, Mary hosted a dinner with friends, writers, artists, retired professors. I video-called my grandchildren, Mason and Chloe, from a Parisian living room strung with twinkling lights. Their faces lit up when they saw me. "Grandma! Show us your paintings," Chloe shouted. Mason held up a Lego Eiffel Tower he built just for me. Stephanie appeared briefly on the call, hair undone, face softer. She didn't ask me to come home. She just wished me, "Merry Christmas, Evie," using the name I'd reclaimed for myself. The months passed, and something unexpected grew in that distance: respect. Boundaries, once barbed, became bridges. My son and his wife weren't trying to pull me back into the old roles anymore. They were learning to meet me as a woman, not a convenient fixture. Eventually, I knew it was time. Not because of guilt, not because anyone pressured me, but because I chose it. I called Adam one snowy night. "I'm coming back in February," I said, "but I have conditions." "Anything," he answered quickly. "I've rented my own apartment near yours. I won't be your live-in babysitter. I'll keep painting. I want a life that's mine." "I understand," he said, and he meant it. Paris had given me something the cruise port had almost taken away: the ability to define myself without asking for permission. I packed my paintings, my brushes, my journal. I said goodbye to Mary, who hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't you dare disappear again." When I stepped off the plane in Denver, they were all waiting, Adam holding a sign that said, "Welcome home, Evie," Stephanie clutching flowers, Chloe and Mason bouncing with excitement. It wasn't the same family. It was a new one. I hugged them all, not as the woman they used to lean on without seeing, but as someone they now had to meet halfway. Over the following months, we built a new rhythm. Weekly dinners where we actually talked. Weekends with the grandkids, without their parents hovering. Time in my own studio 3 times a week. They kept going to therapy, I kept going to watercolor classes. We didn't try to erase the past. We learned to live honestly with it. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after my return, we gathered in their modest new backyard. The house was smaller, less polished, but full of laughter. Adam handed me a glass of wine. "I never thanked you," he said. "For what?" "For not accepting the way we treated you. If you had, nothing would have changed. Losing the house forced us to wake up. You gave us a painful gift." His words hit deep. I'd never thought of my revenge that way, as a gift. But maybe it was. Sometimes the sharpest cuts make room for new growth. I watched the kids run across the grass, Stephanie setting the table, Adam flipping burgers. And for the first time since that text message at the cruise port, my chest didn't ache. I wasn't waiting for an apology or validation. I had already given myself both. Later that week, on my 63rd birthday, they surprised me with tickets to Italy and a painting workshop in Tuscany. So you can keep going, the card read. With love and respect. I held the envelope in my hands, smiling through tears. The woman who had once stood abandoned at a cruise port was now boarding planes to chase her own dreams. I walked into my apartment that night, my space, my life, and set the tickets on the table beside a half-finished watercolor of the Paris skyline. I thought back to that day at the port. Their ship had sailed without me, but my journey had only just begun. Revenge hadn't been the destination. It had been the spark. The real story was about reinvention, boundaries, and becoming visible again. If you felt this story in your heart, make sure you subscribe, tap that like, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. It's never too late to reclaim your worth.